Okay, so we have the video of this event here. Very short video, only about 24 seconds. And it starts here with the gentleman in the black shirt, and it looks like a kerchief tied around his head. He's the prankster. And the victim of the prank is going to walk up in a light blue shirt, and the pretend sucker punch is going to be made, and then the passerby will respond. Here we go.
Yo, 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 yo. Hey, he out, man. Hey, no, he down, man. He down, man. He down, bro. He down, bro.
You'll hear him snoring right there. That's how you know someone's really unconscious, is when you get that snoring sound. All right, so let's take a look. What do we have going on here? So we can call this a prank. Comes up, braces his feet, and this passerby, he looks like he's looking at the dude. He's paying attention, because when that sucker punch comes in, look at this. This dude ducks down even before there's no hand raised by the prankster, right? But he's stepping in like he's going to throw a haymaker. And the victim of the prank sees this, ducks down and get below the haymaker. That's good technique. And comes back with his own punch, first punch right there. Bam, bam. All right. So, is this an appropriate response? Right here. What the heck is that thing anyway, flying up in the air there? Is that the kerchief? Got right up his head. Well, what's the prankster actually doing in terms of the law? Well, he's committing an assault, right? A simple assault. Maybe you could argue it would be an aggravated assault. So an assault is when you conduct yourself intentionally in such a way that you're putting another person in reasonable fear of imminent unwanted contact. And if you're doing that in only a non-deadly force way, typically it's a simple assault, a misdemeanor assault. If you're doing that in a way to put them in reasonable fear of imminent deadly force harm, which means death or serious bodily injury, then it's an aggravated assault and it's a felony assault. So he's certainly committing an assault, right? He's deliberately creating in the victim's mind a reasonable fear of imminent harm. At the very least, it's a simple misdemeanor assault. Even though he doesn't throw the punch, he creates that state of mind in the victim here. That's by definition the crime of assault, as traditionally defined in law school. There is no battery here by the prankster. The battery would be the actual touching, the unwanted touching. So he doesn't actually strike the victim here, right? The prank is the assault, but it's not a battery. So we don't have assault and battery here. Is it a deadly force assault? Is it a felony assault? Well, deadly force includes not just force that can kill, but force that can cause serious bodily injury. Would a sucker punch from behind, thrown with the apparent force, the full body that's being demonstrated here, could you argue that's reasonably likely to cause serious bodily injury to the person struck? I would suggest yes. I mean, loss of consciousness. We've all seen videos of the knockout game, right? Most of those knockouts are done in exactly this way. The victim never sees the punch coming. And so it's easy to knock them out. It's pretty hard to knock out someone who sees the punch coming, because they tend to at least reflexively put their hands up and to some extent block the force of the punch coming in. So these knockout game folks, they come at you when you're looking at your phone, you're not paying attention from the blind side, and they throw as hard a punch as they can into your face, which certainly looks like what's happening here. Could this victim of this prank have a reasonable perception that he's the intended target of not just a simple assault, but an aggravated assault, an assault intended to cause him serious bodily injury, like knocking him out, loss of consciousness? I think he could make that argument. Now, that's the offense that's being committed against him. Now, the element of proportionality, of course, holds that the amount of force you can use in self-defense has to be proportional to the threat you're facing. And if you're only being threatened with non-deadly force, you can only use deadly force in self-defense. If you can't use, sorry, I was thinking ahead. If you're only being threatened with non-deadly force, you can only use non-deadly force in self-defense. You can't use deadly force in self-defense until you're threatened with death or serious bodily injury, a deadly force attack. Now, if we believe this is a simple assault, and it clearly is, then certainly this, at least this first punch, would be a proportional response to the apparent threat. Now, is the threat real? Well, no, it appears to be a prank. Does it have to be real before you can defend against it? No, you can defend against the reasonable perception of the threat. And so certainly the first punch, probably the first few punches here, would be a proportional, non-deadly force response to a misdemeanor simple assault, which is what we have here. Could this victim here have immediately drawn a weapon and used it to defend himself? Well, yes, if you believe that the nature of the sucker punch attack was a deadly force attack, one reasonably likely to cause serious bodily injury, like loss of consciousness. If that's the intent here, then the defender could respond in a proportional way with a deadly force response. Now, of course, this defender doesn't do that. He does something else. And that is that he doesn't stop with the first couple of punches. He doesn't stop when the threat is apparently neutralized. And that touches on the element of imminence. Imminence says that you can defend yourself only against an attack that's actually occurring or immediately about to occur. It can't be something in the past. It can't be a speculative threat in the future. Imminence is like a window. It opens and closes. And your privilege to use force in self-defense is initiated when that window of imminence opens. When you're facing a threat of ability, opportunity, jeopardy. There's the ability to cause harm, opportunity to do so, conducting themselves in a way that suggests to a reasonable person that they intend to bring that ability and opportunity to bear. When this prankster does this sucker punch move here, is he presenting AOJ? Ability, opportunity, jeopardy. Sure. The ability to throw the punch, the opportunity, proximity to bring it to bear, and he's conducting himself in a manner that a reasonable victim of this prank would believe he's about to do that. AOJ is present. We have an imminent threat. We've already talked about the intensity of the threat. So there's an imminent threat here. First punch. Great. I mean, the window of imminence is opened, right? Second punch, third punch, punches him to the ground. At this point, given that the nature of the threat was a barehanded punch, at this point, can we still articulate that the window of imminence is open? Is there still AOJ? I would suggest perhaps not. Certainly, when the beating continues, see the toes go up there? Right now, the prankster is still probably trying to defend himself from the blows, but his toes go up, feet relax, he's unconscious. Once he's unconscious, could there possibly be any imminent threat from an unconscious attacker? I would suggest no. But the beating continues. It continues. It continues. Until finally the victim of the prank is called off, and this prankster is clearly unconscious, as we heard the snoring at the end already. Can this continued beating be justified as self-defense? I would suggest not. I mean, there is no imminent threat anymore. Could it be classified as what might be called an educational beatdown? Now, an educational beatdown is a real thing. I mean, another way to say it would be F-A-F-O, right? F around, find out. But the concept of an educational beatdown is when a beating is sustained for longer than necessary for self-defense to teach someone a lesson, hence the education part of educational beatdown. And a component of an educational beatdown is that the community observing this would agree that it's appropriate under the circumstances. and not see it as a crime. Now, the law, the law does not justify educational beatdowns, but the community would. The community would say that guy stepped over the limits of what we consider acceptable behavior, and now he's getting a beating, and he's earned it. And we're not going to intervene unless the beating gets to a point where we think it now exceeds the educational value that was merited. And that's what happens here. They let him continue throwing punches when clearly he doesn't need to do it for self-defense anymore. But they stop him before he actually beats the prankster to death. Right? That's a step too far for the community. But if you ask him, I doubt anybody watching this would say that was undeserved, not legally warranted, probably. I want to make clear, but certainly well-deserved, because this kind of behavior is not going to be tolerated. And frankly, I would have no public policy objection to it being legally permissible. You would just have to write the laws differently to allow for that. But these pranksters in the social media age are a plague on all of us. And they initiate a lot of conduct that could readily result in their death, right? We saw the Alan Coley event where the prankster ends up getting shot. I mean, it's only a miracle he's not dead. And of course, Alan Coley then had to go to trial and defend himself without the help of USCCA. Thanks, USCCA. And he did get convicted on one charge, the discharge of a firearm in a building charge. The actual use of force charges he was acquitted on. The actual shooting, for example, malicious wounding, I believe. He was acquitted on that charge and irrationally by the jury in what was almost certainly a compromise verdict, convicted on the discharge of a weapon charge. If the only way he was not legally responsible for a malicious wounding was if you believed he did it in self-defense. And if he did it in self-defense, that logically covers the discharge of the firearm in the building too. So you can't, the split verdicts make no sense other than as some kind of compromise among the jury. But that's the risks that these pranksters run. Not just the risk of them getting shot. I hardly care about them, but they're creating risk for the victims of their pranks who may defend themselves, like Alan Coley. So I think, what else? I will say, so I had mentioned that if you felt you could credibly argue that this sucker punch would have been reasonably perceived as a deadly force threat, you could use deadly force in self-defense. That could potentially include a beating to death, except proportionality is not the only element of self-defense, right? We also have that element of imminence. And once the window of imminence is closed, once there's no longer ability, opportunity, jeopardy, there is no privilege to use force. Remember, self-defense requires all the required elements of self-defense. If any one is missing, you have no legal privilege of self-defense.